Hey everyone, today I want to show you guys how to make a cute either a makeup bag or a little accessories bag with our Cricut Maker. I bought this beautiful designer fabric on trend sampler from Cricut a while ago, and I've been dying to use the fabrics, so I finally decided to do this cute little one, and I thought I'd do a tutorial for you guys to show you just a few of the things you can make with your maker. So I designed a little template for you guys here, and I will share it in the comments with the video. So basically you're just going to need two outside fabrics and two lining fabrics, and I just set it up this way so that you guys could see this. On the inside fold here, it says select cotton fabric for my material. So I'm just going to go to make it, and I'm going to go ahead and get there, and I have my 12 by 24 fabric mat, so I'm just going to go ahead and select that for each color here, and I'm going to maybe space it out just a tiny bit. I'm using my Rotary Blade, so I like to have a little bit of space in between each thing. If you can see the little lines here, you'll need your fabric pen because that is going to draw our seam allowance. So I'm going to select my maker, and then I'm going to select cotton fabric, and then I'm going to show you guys the best way to put your fabric on the mat so that it can draw. So I'm going to, I have cotton right here. Perfect. So it's going to tell me I need my washable fabric marker and my rotary blade. My rotary blade's already loaded. I'm going to go ahead, and I have my fabric marker here. You can see it says washable. Let me see if I can focus that. It says washable fabric pen on it. I'm going to go ahead and load that into my Cricut, and then you guys can see I have my pink fabric mat here. Now, I ironed my fabric beforehand. I always recommend that. Get any creases out, especially when you're drawing on the fabric. You really want to make sure that you have a flat line so that your seam allowances are drawn perfectly straight. So my lining fabric is first, because these are cutting the same size and the same amount, it doesn't really matter, but I like to just make sure I'm using the right color. So you can see this fabric's a little, well, it's hard to tell, it's a little lighter on one side, but I'm going to put it, this one really, it's harder to tell, but this fabric's a little bit longer than my mat too. So I'm going to go ahead and line it up, and I am going to do my your pretty side down. It will be easier for you guys to see on my next fabric because that has a pattern on one side. I'm going to use my Cricut Brayer here, and I'm just going to make sure that this is really adhered well to my mat. You can see I've got some bumps in places, and I can go back afterwards and smooth it out with my fingernail. I always recommend, I should have done that, but I usually recommend putting your fabric on your mat really nice and slowly. Clearly I didn't do that today. I just wanted to show you guys this part quickly. So I'm just going to smooth out these little pieces here, and I'm going to load my mat to go. Now it's going to go ahead and draw our seam allowances first, and then it's going to use the rotary blade to cut it. So once it's all done cutting, I will come back and show you guys all of our pieces. Okay, I cut both of my fabrics, but I just wanted to show you guys quickly. You can see the difference here with my fabric. So you put the nice side down, so that way it's a little hard to see because of the pattern, but you can see the blue marker seam lines. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to pull my fabric off. I think that I loaded mine a little backwards, so, or a little wrong. So there's a few places it didn't cut through, but that is my fault. I think I just put my fabric a little too far down on the mat, and it got caught up a little bit. But this piece cut okay. I'm using my new Cricut True Control knife that I'm obsessed with to just kind of cut these extra little pieces here. This piece is fine. It's my top piece because I didn't put my fabric down far enough. So I'm just going to do this one quickly. And I'll show you guys, I have these awesome Cricut tweezers that came with the brayer, and I like to just pull up a corner, and it really helps prevent those loose threads from sticking to my mat and from any fraying. So I've got my pieces cut here, and I'm going to set them aside, and then we'll show you guys how we're going to sew it all together. Hey everyone, I am now going to show you guys how we are going to assemble our little makeup accessory bag. I am not going to be doing the sewing on screen just because I'm using the same table that my phone is attached to, and I don't want to get too wobbly and it's pretty loud. But it's really simple, straight stitches and all of that. So I will show you how we set everything up before I sew, but I won't be doing it on video. So what I'm going to do first is grab one of the pieces of my main fabric, and I'm going to do it pretty side up, and I'll show you for our lining fabric, we'll know which side is which. I am going to take my zipper here. I have a Make a Zipper kit that I used for this, but you'll need one that's at least the length, the width of our fabric here, which is 11.5 inches. So always go bigger. If you can't find one in the exact size, I recommend at least 12-inch, or they have zippers that usually run, 10 to 12 inches or however they do it. So we're going to do that first, and I'm going to put my zipper face down. You can see here I have my zipper. I'm going to put it face down on the pretty side of my fabric, and then I'm going to take the pretty side of my lining fabric. You can tell the difference here because I have those lines that our Cricut drew on here. So I'm going to put the pretty side facing the pretty side, pretty sides together. I'm going to place that on top, and we are going to go ahead and pin that down. I use these Wonder Clips sometimes, which I really love, these little Wonder Clips. But for this, because of the zipper, we are just going to pin it. I just have regular pins here, and I'm going to go ahead and just pin it down. We're only going for this part to be sewing right along the top here, just a straight edge. So you really don't need to worry too much about how far down you're pinning this. Just put some pins in to hold it in place. And make sure that it's all lined up. Once I pin everything down here, I'm going to look at my other side and make sure it's pinned straight. And then I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put it in my sewing machine, and like I already showed you earlier, I'm just going to sew right along the edge here. It's really not going to be a very big seam allowance, maybe a 1/4 of an inch or so. And we're just going to do a straight stitch down that way, and then I'm going to come back for you guys. I also wanted to mention that we are going to be using our zipper foot. I'm going to be using it for the whole length of this project. I forgot to show you guys. So you can see this is what my zipper foot looks like this. So if you've never used a zipper foot before, you're going to attach the left side here to your machine if you're sewing to the right of the zipper, and you'll attach the right side of the zipper foot to your machine if you're sewing on the left side of the zipper. So I know that's a little confusing, but think of the opposites. So I'm sewing on the right side of my zipper right now, so I'm going to be attaching the left side to my machine. I am at the end of my first straight line here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a back stitch, which I also did at the beginning of my stitching, and that just helps really tack down that line. Now normally I would use a coordinating fabric a coordinating thread to match the main color of my fabric. But because I am using a white zipper, I'm going to use white thread. So you can see it here. I'm going to use my little Cricut snippers to just get rid of those excess threads I have here. And right down here at the end, my little threads. And then I'm going to go ahead and I am going to pull this out like this here. And then I want to show you guys, I'm going to be working with the main side of the fabric first, which is our pretty fabric, not the lining one. So I'm going to make sure you guys can see this well. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the second piece of my main fabric and I'm going to place the pretty sides together. And I'm going to place it along the top edge of my zipper here. I'm going to fold this back down so it's going to look. And I'm going to place the pretty side of it here. And then I want to take the pretty side of, I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to take the pretty side of my lining fabric. Let me see it well here, okay? And I'm going to place it here. So we're kind of doing the same thing on the other side. And we're going to go ahead and pin that all down. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to sew just on the top edge right along here, about 1/4 of an inch. And I want to make sure that we go ahead first and we back stitch to make sure everything's held in place. And then we're going to back stitch at the end after we do our straight stitch. And I see here on the other side that this fabric isn't pulled up too much. So I'm going to go ahead and repin it, and then I'm going to go ahead and sew my straight line. Okay, now that I repinned my fabric and I made sure everything's lined up pretty well on both sides, I went ahead and I switched my zipper foot over to the right side because I'm going to be sewing along the left side of my zipper now. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do my straight line with about 1/4 of an inch seam, and then I'll come back. Okay, now that I have that done, I'm going ahead and I'm going to snip all of my little threads. You can snip at the end, but I like to snip as I go along so I don't accidentally miss something or have something get all caught up. So I like to snip as I go along. So now I'm going to open this up, show you guys how it looks. We've got, it's going to look like this, where we have our nice pretty fabrics here and our lining fabrics underneath, and everything is matched up very nicely. And then what I want to do is, looks like I didn't line this up as well as I should have, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to just run a stitch along each side of my zipper here with it open like this, just to reinforce that zipper, because right now it's really only attached to our fabric a little bit on the edge. So I want to reinforce that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a straight stitch down each side here to just really reinforce that. Okay, now that we reinforced that zipper, it should look like this, where it's just nicely sewn down on each side. So our next step for this is going to be sewing together our main fabrics and our lining fabrics. So we're going to go ahead and take our main fabric, we're going to put the pretty sides together, and we want to go ahead and pin that down. And I'm going to do each side at a time because we already have the zipper in, so we kind of want to get it really flat. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to use my Wonder Clips for this since I don't have to worry about the zipper being there. So I'm just going to go ahead and place, you can pin it, you can use your clips, whatever you like to do. And I'm just going to pin around it, but we're only going to be doing some straight lines. So I'm just pinning a lot because as hard as I might try, I feel like I can never go ahead and sew a straight line. Even with my pen lines drawn on here, I'm not perfect. So I like to pin a lot, and I feel I just get a little more control. So I'm going to go ahead and just make sure that we have both sides down. And I'm going to, when I'm done pinning, I'm going to sew around the whole entire set of stuff here. I'm going to do the lining fabric and the main fabric. And now what I want to do is leave a hole in my lining fabric towards the bottom, because that's what we're going to sew up. We have to be able to turn our bag inside out, or right side out, I guess. So what I'm going to do here is pull this pin out so that I know I'm probably going to start around here so that I don't screw myself up and forget to do that, which I tend to do a lot more than I'd like to think about. But I'm going to go ahead, make sure you guys can see this. I'll move you a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and you can see, I'm going to start sewing about a little more than halfway down on this. And at this point, you just want to make sure that you're using the same seam allowance. I'm going to do about 1/4 of an inch. I know I have a 1/2 inch drawn out here, but I'm going to do about 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to start about halfway down in my bag, and then I'm going to sew all the way around, and I'm going to stop before this little orange one right here. So that's a good basis. I like to mark it off with pins. You can use a separate color pin, or you can put a pin in a different way. Sometimes I like to just take one of my pins, like even though I'm using the Wonder Clips, I'll stick a pin in right here. That way I remember, don't go past there. So it's up to you how you like to mark it, but go ahead and mark it, and then you can start sewing all the way around the bag. You can use the 1/2 inch seam allowance that we have drawn on our bag, or we can do 1/4 of an inch. I'm actually probably going to do the 1/2 inch. I'm going to follow that 1/2 inch because we're going to trim this down a little bit so we don't have too much bulk. So that will leave us a little extra trim room. So I'm going to go ahead and sew all the way around my bag, and then I'm going to come back. One thing that I also want to mention here, it might be a little hard for you guys to see, so I'm going to zoom in. You can see that my needle is in the down position. When you are sewing and you're going to have to be making turns, I like to leave my needle in the down position so that I can easily turn it and go down to my next line. Depending on your machine, you can manually move it, or for mine, I have the needle position. Let me see if I can show you guys quickly. I have the needle position little button right here, and I can move that, and it will automatically, when I'm done sewing, automatically stop in the down position so that I can pivot my fabric to go around the corner, which is really great. So I like to do that. It's much easier to move your fabric and keep it all in one piece and keep going in the same direction. And I also forgot to mention, and also do, we are going to make sure our zipper is pulled down a couple of inches. I'm just going to pull it back quickly. We're going to pull it down a couple of inches so that when we go ahead and turn this bag around, we have something easy to do. So make sure your zipper is about 2 inches down before you start sewing. Okay, now that I'm at the end here, I went ahead and back stitched. So I'm going to take this out, and I'm going to go ahead and snip all of my little threads at the ends here. And then we're going to go ahead and we are going to turn our bag inside. Oh, actually, I want to cut our seams down some. We left like a 1/2 inch seam allowance here, so we're just going to cut it down a little bit. We don't want to do too much. You don't want to get too close to the seams, but just trim it down a little bit. I have the amazing Cricut fabric scissors, and I have to say that they cut better than any other scissors I have had. I absolutely love them. They cut through every fabric easily and like butter, and I just love them. You're going to be careful. Moved you guys. You're going to be careful when cutting near the zipper, but you'll even see how awesome these scissors are. They cut right through, no problem. But just be careful when you're around that part. You want to make sure you cut carefully. I want to make sure I don't have my pull tab. Okay, I forgot to pay attention to which side I am on. But we did pull our zipper tab down a little bit, so it should be okay. And this will show you how I can't sew a straight line. Even with the seam allowance drawn, I had a little mishap, but that's okay because we just adjusted and it'll be fine. And I got some threads here because I forgot to put my presser foot back down. So I'm just going to, you can see this is the bulk from the zipper, so we're going to carefully cut across that. And once we go ahead and trim this down, we are going to turn our bag right side out. I'm gonna trim that here. That really isn't a big deal, but it will bother me, so go ahead and do that. And we're just going to carefully, you can see where our opening is right here, so we're going to carefully just pull this apart. And I should have left a bigger hole. I should have left a few inches, but I didn't. So I'm going to put in a little extra work here and very carefully just kind of work your fingers in and out and pull it around. Once you get some of your fabric in, it's going to be a lot easier to do this. You can kind of start putting your finger in and pulling up. Just do it really carefully so that you don't rip any of your stitches. So I should have left a bigger seam allowance here, but you know, that's all right for right now. So we're going to pull this through very carefully, and you're going to see the right sides of our fabric coming through. Made this a lot harder on myself than I needed to. You can kind of start pushing through this way now, through the other way. And we got, pull open our zipper here. That's why we left it open, so we can kind of pull it through, make this a little bit easier. There we go. And we're gonna go ahead and turn it inside out. Going to look real nice, and we want to push out our edges here. Usually I keep something kind of like a dowel rod on hand so I can poke these corners out, but I forgot to grab one, so I can just go ahead, put the cap on my seam ripper, on my little thread trimmers here, and just go ahead and use that to poke out the edges of my bag and just get those edges nice and poked out. And it should look a little something like this. You can see here, it's really cute. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to pull up this little hole down here, and we're going to hand stitch this close. I'm going to go ahead and do it on my machine quickly, but you can just do it by hand so you don't really have anything. Since this is for me, I'm just going to do it on my machine really quickly, but I recommend doing this by hand because you can do like a blind stitch and you won't see anything. But I'm just going to go ahead and do it really quickly on my sewing machine to make it a little bit easier on me. I don't really care that I'll see this, but I'm going to backstitch and we're good. So you can see, you actually can't see the stitch too well, but I missed a spot. That's why I like to do it by hand. But I'm going to go ahead and make sure I did this correctly. And then I'm going to come back and show you guys what we're going to do really quickly. So I just went ahead and fixed that. Nothing is really straight and perfect. Again, why I do it by hand normally. But again, this is just for me, so I'm not too concerned. So now you guys can go ahead and you can leave your bag just as is. I mean, this is really cute, so you can do that. But what I like to do to kind of give it a pouch look with more of a rounded bottom is I like to go ahead and we're going to, I'm not really sure the technical term for this, but we are going ahead and we are going to do a little something to our corners. I'm going to let me find my ruler and then I'll come back with you guys and show you what we're going to do. Okay, I found my ruler, so what we're going to do is we're going to turn our bag inside out for this part. And I'm going to, I have the Cricut acrylic ruler and I love this, especially for sewing because it gets everything perfect. And with sewing, there really is not a ton of room for error, as I have learned. And I really like to make stuff so that everything looks nice and neat and matched up. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and we're going to lay our bag out at a corner like this. And we want it to be where the seams are lined up. So we're gonna kind of lay it down like this to make sure that my seam lines up with my seam down the center of my bag. And then I want to go ahead, I'm not going to do too much, but I'm going to do, we'll say an inch. I'm going to put the tip of my acrylic ruler at the corner here, and at the inch mark, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in a pin to mark that 1 inch mark. I'm going to put it a little behind the pin so I know that I want to go above. I'm going to stitch just below this line here. And now so that we have matching on the other side, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing, and I'm going to pull my stitch, I'm going to pull my corner like this, make sure that my seam lines up with the bottom of my bag. I'm going to measure an inch, and I'm going to pin just above that inch. And then what I'm going to do is just sew directly under this pin, but just a straight line right across here. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys. I'm going to stitch it and then I'm going to come back and show you guys how that goes. Okay, so I went ahead and I did that. I'm going to just snip my threads, and it's really important for this step to make sure that you go all the way across the bag. So you can see here I went all the way across on that side. This side I didn't go perfectly. So normally what we would do is go ahead and snip about 1/4 of an inch down, but because I kind of didn't go all the way down and I didn't check that, I'm just going to go ahead and switch this right back around. It's going to have a little bit of bulk in that corner, but again, this is for me. I'm not too worried. For you guys, make sure you stitched all the way across and then go ahead and snip those edges. You can see in here, you know, that extra bulk down there. So I just make sure you sew all the way across, and then you guys have this. And this is just a little like cuter. It kind of stands up on its own and has those rounded edges, and I think this is just really cute, and I think this is a great beginner project. So I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did.